Hello, everyone.
Hello.
You're welcome to this podcast. We are looking at history, and we're having I'm with my good friend Gav, and we're going to talk about the League of Nations, but taking it from a point of view of the Treaty of Versailles. Uh, Gav, say hello to the people, and then give me a small background of what you remember about the Treaty of Versailles, talking from a perspective of Germany, blame, reparations, war reparations as you understand them.
So basically, I'm Gabriel. I basically cover history and political science and also military theory. Although I mainly do military theory, maybe one day I'll do a podcast on that one. Alright, so basically, what I remember about the Treaty of Versailles is that, as Marshal Petain said, that this is not an armistice, it's merely a ceasefire. No. It's like he said that it's not the end of war, it's merely a ceasefire for 20 years. And he was right, because of the Treaty of Versailles, that it was because of it that World War II started. So, why? I'll just give a brief background. So, basically, for the Treaty of Versailles, Germany had to admit guilt to starting the war. Mind you, it was because of Austria-Hungary and Serbia doing some funny stuff down there in the Balkans and messing each other up that World War One started in the first place. But oh no, Kaiser Wilhelm over here, called aka his nickname is Willy, is over here taking a guilt for starting this war, and Germany as a whole, because of silly Austria-Hungary and Serbia not just having in their funny little bickering and killing. Exactly. And then Germany had to pay a lot of reparations. Now this was because France itself was very pissed that Germany wrecked its northern frontier. Because as you know, during the Western Front of World War II, which was called for 4 years straight, if you see just any pictures of how the northern frontier of France was looking like after World War One, it's basically like it looks like a nuclear wasteland.
So, you're talking about Germany war reparations. Now, that sounds like Germany was angry later.
Very angry, particularly Hitler and those who are pissed that, oh, the Jews caused this. It was the Jews.
Nazi. Now, talk about 1919, and then you tell me about the big three.
Big three who?
The big three. It had sides. Remember that? There were the big three nations. You remember them? And you remember American President Woodrow Wilson?
Yeah.
What do you remember about those big three?
I remember about the big three. First of all, you have France, very pissed at Germany. Britain, still pissed at Germany, but less than France, of course, because they weren't invaded and absolutely kicked, and actually brutally kicked in the butt.
That's a strong one. Okay.
because when France was alone in the war in the beginning, before the British put any significant boots on the ground, they were getting their forces wiped like it was a field day for the Germans.
And do you think that?
And then also the US that joined very late in the war in 1917.
Now that's where I was going. What do you think of the US coming into this war? Okay, and joining the big three, and what was its intention?
I mean, the US played a significant role in winning World War One. And because of that, it's like, okay, we joined late, but without us, you probably would have won in 1919 or 1920. Or if we didn't join at all, you guys probably would have just had a ceasefire, because I doubt Germany had any capacity to really capture Paris and win the Western Front by that time, because of British naval blockade. British naval blockade, blocking any food shipments, any weapon shipments to Germany. They were basically screwed, and they had mass famines by the time of 1917 and 16 and 18.
Now, what do you think were some of the terms in this Versailles Treaty?
Some of the terms: you limit Germany's military size was restricted to
Yes.
just 100,000 men. Wasn't allowed to have any tanks, no air force even.
I suppose. Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Go ahead.
Okay, and then
we're
also,
still talking about the terms.
and then also their navy was also heavily restricted, to the point, they couldn't have any big guns in their ships, like they couldn't have battleships.
So not only the size of the military, but also the size of the weaponry was restricted.
Yeah.
Which other terms would you remember in between? That really you would see in the aftermath that would anger Germany to come out.
Of course, them paying a stupendous amount of debt to the Entente.
Okay.
And that was because France was stupid. Again, was really, really pissed that Germany just blew up their northern frontier.
Okay, now that's a very good background to. Thank you for giving me that background to the League of Nations. That was
Versailles.
now we move from the Versailles, because one needs to understand the other background in order to establish this background. Remember, all these are looking for peace.
Yeah.
Okay, the whole idea is the treaties were all a peace deal. Now the first peace deal, it failed, right?
Yeah. First peace deal, it failed.
It failed. Now let's move to the League of Nations. How and what purpose was it built for?
Okay, so
And
after
give me some of the minds behind this League of Nations.
Okay, so after World War One, everyone was like horrified at the cost of it. It was the war. Like everyone was like, "This is the war to end all wars." It didn't have that. World War One did not have that saying after it because of nothing. Because basically, how many people died? Like 20 to 30 million, even 40 is
Yes, there are very many people.
very tens of millions.
Yes. Lives were lost across Europe.
Millions displaced too.
In fact, both wars affected Africa in a way.
Although not as much as Europe.
Yes, not directly.
As much as Europe, because
Yeah.
if you see how Europe looked like in both World War One and Two, World War
Cities were flattened,
flat,
flat on the ground.
like look at the field of Verdun after World War One. That was basically like you look like a nuclear hellscape.
So you're telling me about the League of Nations.
So yeah, basically everyone was horrified after World War One, and so they wanted to have an organization that would prevent more wars. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. It was basically very, very inept and wasn't really able to do anything if a big power was basically doing their own stuff and just like Japan doing their own fluff in China during the in Manchuria during the Marco Polo Bridge incident.
Yes. Now, the League of Nations.
Was it Marco Polo or
You're talking about the Manchurian?
there was some railway that the Japanese blew up themselves. They blew up their own railway through Manchuria so that they could invade it. It wasn't Marco Polo.
It wasn't Marco Polo. Marco Polo was way back.
It was after.
Yes, so this is after. So I want us to just focus on that background of the League of Nations. So, give me your open opinion. Why does man keep going to war?
Hey man, I tell you, as a person who used to argue a lot online, simply having a slightly different opinion from another person, that's enough for a person to come and kill you. Some people are sensitive, really sensitive.
Okay, you remember the Manchurian crisis?
Yeah, when
What
Japan came and occupied Manchuria.
What about the Abyssinian crisis?
Abyssinia.
Yes, Abyssinian crisis.
Basically, during the time of Haile Selassie in like 1930.
Haile Selassie, Ethiopia.
Yeah, during like the time of, was it 1936? Basically, Italy came and invaded Ethiopia and were doing badly against a bunch of half-naked dudes who didn't even have modern weaponry. Okay, they did, but barely any.
True. So you've seen all those two crises. Now, the League of Nations has an assembly, okay? Then it has secretariats and then councils and all these things. Do you think any of those would have been effective in stopping any wars? Or it's just a bunch of gentlemen going to sit down, enjoying a cup of coffee, and then, saying one army don't attack another army, one country you don't have to have an army, another country build whatever weaponry, assess that kind of arrangement?
Okay guys, you all know World War II. Just the mere fact that war happened is enough to tell you that the League of Nations failed spectacularly at its job.
And then after failing, we had a rise of dictators, what they call dictators.
Yeah, Hitler, the Japanese military basically gained control of the Japanese government.
And you know that Hitler, one of Hitler's purposes was to overturn the Treaty of Versailles. But also he had his own personal issues. And
The
some
Jews.
Yes, the personal issues of the Jews. And then also the growth of technology and rearmament. Okay? So everyone, we are looking at an arms race. Everyone wants to show off, just like modern day.
Like during the Cold War, how the Soviet Union and USA had a nuclear arms race because they wanted more nukes in order to blow themselves. Even though I don't get the real purpose of the nuclear arms race, because even just like 1,000 nukes is enough to blow a nation off the face of the earth. But those were statistics I read earlier, as if the Soviet Union needed to be nuked 5,000 times in order to be erased off the face of the planet, because it had a very centralized government that could survive a nuclear apocalypse. Anyways, aside from that, I'm going to the Cold War.
Now, before we go into that Cold War, do you think the League of Nations achieved anything?
Do I think it achieved anything? What did they even achieve? I'm often used to hearing people just slamming it. Now I'm trying to think of any. I know they didn't achieve anything big, that's for sure. Maybe they prevented a few minor wars here and there, like maybe in Africa or something, or South America. But other than that,
So was it a waste of time?
I mean, they prevented minor wars. Maybe it wasn't that much of a waste of time. But in the end, a major war broke out, World War II. So, if they failed to. Their main role was to prevent another world war, and they failed.
And
Yeah.
you're still saying something?
No.
Okay. Now, when we look at, because you've given us the aims of the League of Nations, then how would you critique it?
Very, very, very inept.
Reasons?
Reasons. Okay, it's less because they are inept and more because they couldn't do anything about the big powers in the room, like Japan and Germany.
That's why you're calling them inept.
Oh, it's less about them being inept and more about them having no power over big nations.
And do you think that it was established as a system to control
The minor nations.
minor nations?
But it worked because minor nations stopped bickering, but they're bickering less over each other. Because Big Daddy, you went with with Britain, France, Japan, could just come in and just militarily intervene and then stop the crisis.
Now, let's look at it from this point of view also. I just have a few things that I wanted to look at. Did you think that this League of Nations brought any new ideas?
We got the idea of world peace. That's for sure. That's for certain. And that was the founding principle behind the United Nations. Everyone wanted world peace after World War II. And because of the League of Nations, that idea continued.
And also another thing is that I think it was intended, the League of Nations was also intended to improve lives of people. You know, when you stop wars, somehow you improve lives of people. Okay? You know, to deal with drugs, to deal with diseases, to deal with all these things. What do you think? Drugs, diseases, slavery.
Well, they sure improved the lives of those 70 million people in World War II.
I mean, drug trafficking. When you relate the League of Nations and the United Nations, has it done anything about drug trafficking? Well, I'm pulling you back and forth. Because the League of Nations initially was intended to improve lives of people, you know, fight diseases, and that's why you have it now breaking down with all these World Health Organizations and everything. Then to help stop drugs, okay, you remember the Chinese and the drug wars? Have you read about Opium Wars?
Where the British took the side of the drugs.
Now, it was stopping, it was also helping to stop the trafficking, but also slavery and working conditions of people. I think it achieved in some of those areas. The League of Nations may have achieved in some of those areas. What do you think?
League of Nations did achieve some. I mean, after World War II, there was a way less conflict in the world because it was there. I mean, not after World War II, after World War One. So basically, yeah, it did achieve some peace for a brief period of time, like just 10 or 13 so years before all hell let loose.
True. So, like I said, it's full of assemblies. It was full of councils. It was full of secretariats, like we have them today. What do you talk of? What do you talk about that kind of international organization, that order in which they arrange themselves? Was it strategic?
In which they arranged themselves. The way they arranged themselves meant that the big powers could do anything they wanted. That's it. And the smaller powers, if they were bickering, the big powers to come in and be their big daddy and beat them up.
Because when you create a secretariat, then you must have a secretary general.
Yeah.
Now, what's the role of a secretary general anyway in these leagues? And then you also have councils where you have permanent members.
Those are the main things I'm talking about. The permanent members who could veto anything.
So was it selfish
to have those big powers? Precisely. To have those big... Your trust in the British Empire to do good things, and the French Empire to do good things, and the Japanese to do good things. Like there's some cute little toddlers that are just full of life and innocence. They can't possibly do wrong. Of course not. They are big, powerful empires that are out of touch with their populace, particularly those they colonized.
Do you have any idea about the background of the Red Cross? And
Yeah.
during these wars, was the Red Cross really important?
Which wars?
Huh?
Which wars?
We are talking about the First World War and all these other wars.
Very important. Very, it saved like what? Hundreds of thousands, or if not millions of lives.
Okay, because still the League of Nations was supposed to be helping with refugees.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you have a background on which European countries suffered the most after First World War?
Well, you have France, then you have Germany. It was to put the one which suffered the most. You have Russia and then Austria-Hungary, because those two empires totally disintegrated. Austria-Hungary ceased to exist after World War One. Everyone declared independence and they were just and were all sovereign states, including Austria and Hungary themselves.
Okay, so I had a list of some of the committees that were there. You had a commission, okay, which helped with reparations. To repatriate people. Okay.
Yeah.
You had a refugee organization.
Yeah.
You had a slavery committee. Okay. You had a health committee, and then you had a international labor organization, and then yes, that's just to mention, but a few of those. Okay. Those were some of the breakdown of what they intended to do. Okay, guys, we shall be coming back in the second part. Thank you, Gabriel, for sharing that information.
Actually, do we do so one day a podcast on military theory?
Yes, we shall. We shall. So you had him. He was sharing that information right from the Treaty of Versailles to the League of Nations, and you've had his idea, his opinion on the League of Nations. Okay. Now, entirely the purpose of this podcast is, it's not that if you're going to do an exam or something, you get it out of exactly his
Actually,
opinion.
It will help with your GCSEs. Don't joke.
So we're just sharing a background that could help some information, vital information, in answering some of those questions. We shall be back with part 2 of the League of Nations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.